Hello and welcome to IMHO. Today I'm speaking to Chris Green about key learnings from the Web Almanac 2025 report. Chris is Technical Director at Talk Partnership and a search veteran of 15 plus years. He advises Fortune 500 companies on search strategy and the evolving relationship between brands, algorithms, and AI systems. Last week, the Web Almanac 2025 report was released with the SEO chapter updated by Chris, Sophia Brahman, and Amaka Chukwama. The chapter focuses on crawlability, indexability, metadata, structured data, internationalization, AI search readiness, and changes in how content is being understood by machines. So moving straight in, one of the things that I took from the chapter that you updated, Chris, was robots files are being used not to just to control search engine access, but also to express intent about AI crawler access. For example, directives naming bots like GPT bot and Claude bot are increasingly present. And I also picked up on LinkedIn that Owen Hen also wrote about how bot management had become a new challenge, something you'd shared.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Chris, the challenge with bot management is? And now that AI crawlers are named in robots.txt files, how do you think this affects standard SEO practice and strategy?
Wow, really great question. So I think there's a couple of key points around this. Firstly, it's showing that people are being aware that there's a new dimension to bot management. So SEO used to just be, are you letting Googlebot or Bing crawl your website broadly? And that was kind of it. Certainly from the SEO point of view, that was all we really cared about. And that dynamic has shifted very, very quickly. So the need to be conscious of lots of different crawlers, what their intention is, and fundamentally what blocking them does. Like blocking some bots has bigger implications than others. So firstly, it's just showing that SEOs are becoming aware of that. But the second element to that is, especially when we talk about it as part of robots.txt, is it requires these providers to actually listen to those rules and like behave, treat those files as appropriate. And we kind of know that that's not always happening. Like the kind of the ethics around following robots and AI crawlers is very, very muddy. But SEOs need to know this and understand this more. I think the Web Almanac showed the symptom through the robots.txt usage, but for SEOs to really get ahead at it, it's understanding what are your other means and methods of controlling bots. Most of this will take place at the CDN layer or with whichever's like security measures you have in place. Like you might want to allow GPT bot. I strongly suspect you do want to. Other people might not. You might not want DeepSeek there, or you might not be super interested with Claude or Perplexity or what have you. And it's not only understanding what the impact of each is, but also how to communicate that with the business. If you've got a team who want to cut as much bot crawling as possible because they want to save money, that might desperately impact your AI visibility. Equally, you might have an editorial team that doesn't want to get all of their work kind of scraped and regurgitated and might feel very strongly on that. So we as SEOs need to understand that dynamic, how to control it technically, but how to put that argument forward in the business as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting how we've shifted from, what was it, 2 years ago, where there was obviously
Yeah.
a huge panic of block all the bots, and
Yeah.
yeah, we
Only
don't want
allow
to allow them.
explicitly, yeah, which is
Yeah,
we're in a completely different world now.
yeah, which kind of almost segues into another thing that I picked up from the chapter that I was reading. That you now this is an interesting topic. You highlight the emergence of llms.txt files
Yep.
intended to communicate preferences about how content can be used or repurposed by LLMs. Now, these llms.txt files have been very controversial. I think in the industry, they've provoked a
Incredibly.
very strong reaction online,
Yeah.
with a lot of
One
people
one
thinking it
little
has
old text
absolutely no
file.
purpose. Yeah. Now, currently, there's around about a 2% adoption rate. So, do you believe that this will become widely adopted or remain a
Mm,
niche experiment?
mm. So firstly, 2% was higher than I expected. So we this is the first time we crawled that data, and I crawled the Majestic Million about 8 months before, and it was vastly smaller number. And obviously, this space emerges very quickly. A lot of the discourse around it is very muddled, and the controversies come and gone. I think the 2% is still low, but it's still significant. And the biggest route that I saw of that was related to like SEO tools, all-in-one SEO, Yoast SEO, enabling that. And I think some of that was default to on, but a lot of people were doing the checkbox work. And I think ignore all of the other adoption of that, that has been quite a significant boost to that. And I have a feeling we will see that rate of adoption climb really quickly. Google have time and again said they don't plan to use it. It's not important. They reiterated that when we were in Zurich at Search Central last year. And I think fundamentally, Google doesn't need it. Not really. Google's got this crawling and rendering thing nailed now. Obviously, it would be cheaper if something like LLMs worked, but um, they've said they're not doing it. So for me, I think it hinges on whether OpenAI say they will or won't use it. I think if they don't, if they stay on the fence or they say no, I think that standard pretty much stops there and then. It's not even really a standard, it's a proposed standard. I think I think OpenAI have other problems, far bigger fish to fry than trying to set up a new standard and crawl and ingest in different ways. We had a really strong preference as part of the Web Almanac to not take a view on whether we thought it was good or not, because frankly, the view is mixed. I personally don't think it's going to be super useful, but people keep showing me interesting data that suggests otherwise. Um, I think a well-intentioned niche experiment. I do a lot of work with AI. I build a lot of workflows. Anything that you can aid LLMs to infer and do a better job is noble. But this particular one, I think, if unless the really big providers, Google, OpenAI, step in line, I don't think it will really lift off.
So you just said there that some people have showed you some interesting data on this. Have you got an example of anything that you've seen?
Uh, I can't. The name escapes me. I've seen a lot more people showing me the log data of these LLMs text files being crawled and fetched. Now, I know that's not a hard and fast sign, but we are seeing them more and more, and I'm seeing them referenced more, like as sources from results. Still very niche cases, but sometimes they will be used as a source for data, like be cited. And I would say where you have websites that have almost unpassable content without an LLM's file, I think that would likely be used. I also don't think that gives you a super large kind of advantage. I think it kind of probably brings parity. But a year ago, we were seeing none of that in access logs, and now we're seeing it quite prolifically. So yeah, it's some people treat that as a sign that that it's becoming a common path that crawlers look at. I still don't think it is yet, but it could be.
Just stepping out a little bit more broadly, there's a lot of online industry talk that centers around the question, has SEO changed? And I think there's a real divided opinion. There's one camp who think it's just the same. It's just, SEO is now applied to an LLM. And then there's another camp saying, no, it is completely different. And actually, we were just having a chat and you were saying how some of your clients actually have different teams for what they're calling AEO and GEO. I think everybody knows that to be actually visible in an LLM, you have to be indexed by Google. That is the starting foundation. Yeah, AI visibility is not simply an extension of search visibility, but requires a different approach. And so, how do you think SEOs should balance the differences? I mean, did you pick up anything in your research in the Almanac to support this?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So in terms of, does the web look hugely different now because of what we need to do to cater for AI? I'd say the answer is broadly no. If anything, there are some signs that people are more willing to utilize JavaScript, or like the render gap, like the amount of words rendered in the raw code versus in JavaScript. If anything, in some instances, that gap's widening, not drastically. And I stress, like when you're talking small percentage shifts over a year, it's hard to be super on top of what exactly drove that. But no, the state of SEO hasn't fundamentally shifted or changed, I don't think, because of AI and what we need to do. However, as you pointed out, we're talking about different systems, we're talking about different capabilities. If Google and Gemini continue at the pace and trajectory that they are now, where we see, ChatGPT looking like it could possibly be unseated, I think actually that will lead the two to converge much more quickly, because fundamentally, again, something else that Google said at Zurich last year is the two systems are kind of linked. They've got Gemini sat on top of a search index as part of their RAG process. So it's very much intertwined, but how your content is interpreted, how it's retrieved, how it's generated into response is all very different. So I would say there's a very significant overlap between what SEO was before we started worrying about this and what we are at the start of 26. A very significant overlap. I'd argue that the same teams can absolutely be the best people. But I do also believe if anyone's telling you no, it's exactly the same, I'd be worried that they weren't aware of the different systems, the different weightings, the fact that, interpretability, interpretation, retrieval, and generation are completely different. So it's kind of all the same, but it's still no, sorry, it's all different, but it's reassuringly the same in the places that matter. You will need to approach it differently. I think SEOs will move more towards feeds, feed management, feed optimization. We're on a collision course with potentially marketing technology teams, paid teams, like areas that SEO wasn't typically as into. I think we are going to care about that a lot more. And Google's Universal Commerce Protocol, where you could potentially transact directly from search results or from a Gemini window, obviously changes a lot. It's just another move to push the website out of the loop, but the information, what we're actually optimizing, still needs to be optimized. It's just in a different place.
Yeah, I think things are going to change quite dramatically. I think this year might be the tipping point, particularly with, like you say, feeds, agentic SEO, agentic AI, and how we optimize for that and through feeds and through closed loop systems, etc. I think that's going to probably have the biggest impact. We'll talk about that in a minute, but just out of all the research that you did from the Web Almanac, was there anything that actually really surprised you?
I think the biggest part that surprised me is the impact that CMSs and kind of big platform providers have. It was kind of a surprise, but no, I don't think I realized just how big. So if we looked at the adoption or the introduction of llms.txt, the biggest single impact was tools and tool providers, and probably WordPress, to be frank. But other platforms, Shopify, Wix, etc., are shaping the actual state of tech SEO probably more profoundly than I think a lot of people truly give it credit for. I'd say the vast majority of SEOs are trying to do the right thing and do the best job. But I think when you look at it at the level that you are forced to with the Web Almanac project, there's just so much data. And when you go through and you see out of robots text files, like how many people are still using out of date user agents, how long it takes people to stop using out of date markup or depreciated markup. If Google has said, "Oh, adopt this technique," and then a year later they say stop, that could take months, years, if at all, to stop seeing that thing happen. And I think as well intentioned as individual SEOs are, I think our overall impact on the web is minimal outside of CMS platforms providers. So I would say if you are really determined to have an impact outside of your specific clients, you need to be like nudging WordPress or Wix or Shopify or some of the big kind of plug-in software providers within those ecosystems. But there is an opportunity in that, because if that is the case, and you're saying that not many websites are actually getting it right outside of that, there's a big opportunity to actually get even further ahead, because there are so few sites where so many people are putting so much emphasis on the technical standards and getting them right. If you do, could be a key point of differentiation. So I'd say that's a learning. It's kind of a reinforcement of something I suspected, and I've seen a lot of SEOs being very much like Google owe us. We maintain the internet for them. We do all the dirty work, and I think we do, but I also don't think we have as much impact, perhaps at an industry level, as maybe some like to believe. And I think the data in the Web Almanac kind of helped show me that there's still a lot broken. Like the web is really messy, really messy.
I picked up, you did write it recently actually about how AI agents are quickly being
Yep.
introduced, and that how potentially, are we going to be replaced by agents? And a quote you said, I think this is in your LinkedIn post, you said, the real question for 2026 isn't whether agents will replace people, it's whether we're willing to understand our work well enough to shape how they're used. Now, I had a look at some of the comments in that post yesterday, it was LinkedIn, and a few of the responses, they both agreed that the emphasis is on the human to ensure that the process isn't broken before it's automated. Otherwise, you're just scaling a mess. So my question here was, what recommendation do you have for starting to build agents?
Well, yeah. So I think firstly, agents are one of those things that are really easily misunderstood because I think actually we use the term, lots of people use the term kind of differently. I think the probably the best way of thinking it is a lot of what we do is process driven or should be. It doesn't mean to say that that process doesn't add value or not, but very often in the past, where SEOs really add their value is when we take in lots of different data sources and use our judgment to do stuff with that. And I would say very often 60, 70, 80% of that could be entirely automated. But I would say would often take the vast majority of someone's time to actually do it. And what I'm suggesting is agents can even now kind of accumulate that data, sort, group, select, put forward recommendations. I think the SEOs need to inform how that agent functions, like what order does it do things, what does it check for where, and then it needs to quality check and then understand what do I do with these outputs, how do I actually put them in practice. And I think that's going to be much more about SEOs, the brain and the work around it. So we're either architecting it or we're implementing it. I think the middle part around the data gathering analysis part will start to fade away. If you've never used an agent before, though, I would say like playing with Claude Code or Cursor, or even custom GPTs or Gemini gems, something that you can kind of build a very specific process to yourself. You kind of set out the system prompt or the agent MD file, and you say, I want to do this process. I want you to do these things using these data sources for this end. And what you'll find really, really quickly is Cursor, Claude Code will do that task really fast. You'll be like, there you go. You'll be amazed at how quickly it's done it. But then the more you inspect it, you'll see that it's only got you 80 to 90% there. Like you're like, okay, this is great. It's very impressive, but I can't do anything with it. It's kind of like a very, very able intern at that point. Um, and it's going to take your knowledge and your expertise to make that applicable to your given like context. And I don't just mean to the context of web marketing or the context of e-commerce. I mean the context of the business that you're specifically working for. And I would argue that a lot of SEOs, particularly more often freelance or agency based ones, don't spend enough time about actually like customizing what they do to the client specifically. It's very much productized. They're very much limited to how far they can stray. And I'd say this gives us the opportunity to build an 80% complete process for a handful of your clients or whoever you're working for. But there, where you add the real value is where you then optimize the business logic. Why might that keyword not work for that page? What is it about this particular range of products that doesn't make that recommendation a good one? AI won't know that until you've told it, and you won't be able to tell it that from the first time you build it. So I'd say work with tools like that in user interfaces that don't put the emphasis on you writing the code. There are some really great books around agentic design patterns being one of them. Antonio Gulli he's a engineer from Google. Great book, worked through it myself. It's got some really decent examples, but you don't need to code. You really, really don't. We're not in that area. You just need to have more of that in mind of an architect. You need to understand the process that you're trying to optimize. And as you said right at the start, if the process isn't very good, you've just created a machine to produce mediocrity at scale, which frankly doesn't help anyone. It's like the AI content boom is just a complete fallacy because 99% of it just looks okay, but was no better than what preceded it. And we're just doing really bad stuff just really quickly and cheaply now, which doesn't solve a problem. If anything, it creates one. So that's my rallying cry. So look, if we're not in that conversation, though, if we just go refuse to engage with that agent, there's a good chance that people will be replaced by them. I mean, people might be replaced by them either way, and that's certainly not my emphasis. I think in the right circumstances that doesn't have to happen. But businesses are looking to make optimizations or efficiencies. And I suggest the people that engage with it and make those processes better and show how they can be continually evolved, they'll be the ones that have greater longevity, I'm pretty sure.
Chris, it's been fantastic to speak to you, and thank you
Lovely.
very much. For anybody who wants to find you, the best place is LinkedIn. Is that right? What's your
LinkedIn,
URL, Chris?
Chris Green SEO, and I think it's the same on Blue Sky as well.
Yeah, please, everybody go check out Chris because he is a super smart person to follow. For everybody else, please like IMHO and subscribe if you haven't already. And then you will get all the latest episodes. We've got some really great guests coming up for 2026. So please, I hope you're going to stay with us in the journey. So thank you very much, Chris, for your
Thank
time
you.
and speak to you soon.
Cheers then.